Want to bring in Fox 2 Sports Director and the voice of the Detroit Lions, Dan Miller, joining us now. How you doing, Dan?
Good, man. What's happening?
Not a whole lot, man. Just enjoying a beautiful fall-like day on a Tuesday, right? No doubt.
No, listen, I went somewhere last night and I got hit by that rain. I'm like, man, that's a cold rain. It felt like fall. So, yeah, I'm with you.
It's football season. Hey, Dan, just overall big picture view, 30,000 feet. Your first just initial impression of the Lions on Friday night in preseason game number 1.
You know, I think if you're a coach, you look at that and you say, you had a late game situation where you sent 11 guys out there on offense to go try to win the game. They got the game-winning score. Then your go-ahead scored, and then you had 11 guys on defense that you sent out there to say, stop them, don't let them win, and you're able to do that. I think, you know, even if those guys aren't going to be playing, you've been working with those guys through the offseason and through a couple weeks of camp. You're happy that they went out there and acquitted themselves well in those situations. And then if you're looking at the guys that were playing at the beginning of the game, you know, I thought Brian Branch really flashed. His instincts are just obviously. Chase Cota made a couple of nice catches. Everybody's going to talk about J-Mo. That was a drop that I'm sure he would like to have back. And you know, I think these practices that they had against the Giants and the practices they'll have against the Jags coming up this week, for the veterans, that's become the preseason. Really, that's the reps that the coaches are looking at, and they like those because A, they're a little more controlled, less chance of injury, but B, you want to work red zone, stick them in the red zone. You want to work, 2 minute, you stick them in 2 minute. They can really control what they're looking at, whereas in a game, you may or may not get those situations.
And the Jags come in tomorrow for 2 workouts, and then, of course, the game on Saturday. Dan, one of the things that we were talking about, just speaking of the quarterback position, Teddy Bridgewater spoke to the media for the first time yesterday since his signing. The guy just looks like a pro. How much do you think he will add to that quarterback room and this football team, just in confidence alone?
Well, I love what he said about working with young players. That, he said basically, I make them check with me before they leave the field after practice. And I think that kind of presence is fantastic. And he was already throwing with J-Mo after practice yesterday. And he made a point to say yesterday when he addressed the media that he's going to dig in on J-Mo and he's going to make sure that he's headed in the right direction. He wants all that potential to be tapped. And he said, I'm going to put him through some things where he may not like me very much. So I think he likes to clearly put his stamp on young players. I think that's the kind of guy you want to have around because this team is full of young players. I think having guys like him, having guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, veterans that set an example and a tone for young players is huge for this football team. And look, he's started 65 games in this league. He may not be what he was 5 years ago, but if you get into a situation where Ben Johnson needs to design a game plan for Teddy Bridgewater to go out there and win a game or two, I think you feel much more confident about that than what they had before. It's just, look, Nate Sudfeld has not played in this league. He has not done the things that Teddy Bridgewater has done. You anticipate you are in much, much better shape now with Teddy Bridgewater. If you look around the league, he's probably considered one of the better backups in the league. And then there's not that many that you're real comfortable with. But, he's got to get in here, learn that playbook, get some reps, and be ready to go. But I think you feel much better now with where you are having him in the fold than you did. And look, Brad Holmes said it at the end of last year. They had not addressed that backup quarterback. Heck, I think it's been a long time since we addressed that here in Detroit, period. So I just think it's a big step forward that you don't need until you really need it.
No doubt. And Bridgewater, as you mentioned Jameson Williams. Look, we talk about Jameson Williams more than I'm almost comfortable with doing on this show. Other people do. It feels like it's the preseason of Jameson Williams. Is this guy right now, anyway, in a no-win situation because, he has a drop the other night, or he goes out there and goes, 7 catches, $112, and 2 touchdowns, and that's what he should be doing against second and third stringers. It just feels like he's in a little bit of a no-win situation right now. Do you see it that way? How do you see it?
Yeah, we're picking it apart. There's no doubt about that. But that also comes with being the number 12 pick in the draft. And, I was talking about it last night. Look, we're doing that to Spencer Torkelson. And we're doing that to Killian Hayes. I mean, we're picking these guys apart and looking at what they do and whether or not they're living up to where they were drafted. And, you know, JMO's probably a more of a spotlight on him because he only played in 6 games last year. He only had 1 catch. There have been some drops. There's been talk about other drops, and we've seen the drops in practice. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him, but that comes with the gig, and that comes with the contract, and that comes with being an NFL player. So, yeah, do I think it's overdone a little bit? Yeah, when we start breaking down what he's doing late at night or if he's lighting off fireworks and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, we're probably taking it a bit too far. But having expectations for him and expecting him to be an impact player, a high impact player, that's why they drafted him. That's why they traded back up to get him. That's not going too far. Those expectations should be there. They should be there from you, from me, from the coaching staff, from the fans, and from himself.
Talking to Fox 2 sports director Dan Miller, voice of the Lions as well. Dan, you know, you talk about these joint practices. Obviously, on Friday night, we did not see the top 6 offensive linemen, any of the starters really at all, minus some of the rookies that we expect to be starters at some point. Do you think we'll see these starters at any point in the games in the preseason?
No. I don't. I think I just think these joint practices in particular, when you have 2 of them, and look, Ryan, I don't know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling you, I don't think so. I just don't think they want to risk the injury. I think that most of these guys will not play at all in the preseason. We'll see. Dan Campbell may come out tomorrow and say, we're going to give these guys, you know, some reps, but I don't think so. Their reps will come in these joint practices. Just because they want to get to the regular season as healthy as possible. Look, Jared Goff wouldn't have played at all last year in the preseason if he had not insisted on playing in that 3rd game. So I think that's where we are right now in the NFL, that these joint practices have become the preseason for veteran players. And in some respects, that's great for younger players that get, you know, more reps and you know, get looks right off the bat in a game. And it's all about getting ready but staying healthy. And I really believe that they feel like when you're going up against Jacksonville's ones, the offensive line can you know, get their work in, and Jared Goff can get his timing in, and the receivers working against their top cornerbacks can get their work in as well. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, but I think for the most part, if you're a veteran who's established and you know is going to be starting, you're not going to be playing a whole lot. If you're a veteran like Julian Okwara, who needs to go out there and show this coaching staff something, you're going to be playing a lot. Romeo Okwara, who's trying to show them that he's come back off an injury. You know, you again, case by case, but for the most part, if they know exactly who you are, where you are, and what they believe you're bringing, and what they're expecting of you, I just don't see these guys playing in the preseason.
Dan, every preseason there does feel like there's somebody on the roster that you're just rooting for to make the team, whether it's Tom Kennedy one year, Dan Skipper one year. It feels like Dylan Drummond is that guy this year. And then Chase Cota goes out there and has a really nice showing on Friday night. How about that battle for maybe a final wide receiver spot? And what is the odds of a Dylan Drummond making the team maybe?
Oh, I think it's decent. I mean, especially with J-Mo not being in there. I mean, look, your top guys are set at this point. You got a couple of veterans in there, but then you get to the Mims, Cota, Drummond. You know, do they keep Mims just because he's got such, you know, skills, speed, size that you can't teach anywhere, and they want to see if they can get that out of him? Or do they look at a guy like Drummond and say, you know what, this is just a diamond that we came up with, and he's a great story, to your point. You know, doesn't get a call on draft day, doesn't get a call after the draft, really only gets one invitation to a rookie camp, which isn't a guarantee that you're even going to get to training camp, and the guy's just gone out there and made plays. He'll get a lot of snaps coming up on Saturday, and he's got to do something with them. Probably should have caught that touchdown pass the other day. That's one he let get away. And Cota went out there and really took advantage of all the opportunities that he had. And again, he's got some physical traits that you love. He's 6'4", he's 205, he's a 4'5" guy, so he's not slow. So again, a chance for him to go out there. I do think there's a back end of the receiver spot open to one of those guys that establishes themselves. Again, I think, Amon-Ra is going to be there, and Khalif Raymond is going to be there, and Marvin Jones is going to be there, and Reynolds is going to be there. Beyond that, I think there's some questions there.
Dan, in the time that we last talked to you, the Lions have sold out season tickets for the first time in Ford Field history. The Super Bowl odds have jumped 25-1 to 22-1. They're the most bet team to win the NFC championship. There is so much positive going on with this football team right now, and the love this organization is getting as a whole. How has this thing changed in 3 years?
It's probably a long answer. I think it starts with the vision that Sheila Hamp and Rod Wood and Mike Disner and Chris Spielman had. And I didn't go back to them hiring Chris Spielman and the understanding that they needed to change the culture within the building. And before you even got a coach or got a GM or started bringing in new players, you needed to make sure that everybody in that building was on the same page. And everybody in that building felt like they were valued, because I think with the previous regime, that wasn't the case. But you need everybody to understand, whether you're in media relations, public relations, whatever your department is, sales, that you're part of something and considered important. And that when you go to work on Monday, that what you're doing is of value. And then I think you got to hiring guys that were going to continue that. And Dan Campbell, who I think we all know is just a good dude. He just is who he is. And Brad Holmes, who's the same way. And the way that they work together in collaboration with Disner, with Spielman, with everybody from the top, from Sheila and Rod on down. It starts there, and it starts with just an attitude and an understanding of how you want to do it. But the people that you want to do it with, and that they're people that are going to bring that culture to everybody else. And then I think, look, they've done a good job of drafting players, but more important than that, or equally as important, their coaching staff has done a good job of developing players. I mean, you and I have talked about this before here, Ryan. Guys don't come into this league understanding how to play in the NFL. You have to teach them how to play in the NFL. And for too long, there was no draft and then development in Detroit. And there were too many guys that never even got to a second contract because they got to the end of the first and they were like, doesn't need to come back. He hasn't distinguished himself. The teams that win year after year, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the teams that do it consistently, New England, they understand the type of player they want. But it doesn't end there. They then take those players and their coaches develop them within a system that you have that allows you to build depth and continue that thing year after year after year. And the understanding that you're not going to build your team through free agency, because free agency is a way to fill holes. And a lot of times if you have so many holes because you didn't draft and develop, it just doesn't work. We've tried that here in Detroit. It's not a way to build. Now, if you get to the end of the season, you say, you know what? We're pretty solid in most places. But, man, we need to rebuild our secondary. Okay, then you can go out and get C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley and say, you know what, secondary, we've turned that thing over. It's solid, but you can't make a living like that. And you can't build your depth chart like that. So it's a long-winded way of saying it's culture, which is a word that's thrown around, but it is a meaningful word when done correctly. And then it's so important that you have both ends of the equation, drafting and developing. And Dan Campbell, one thing he's gotten a lot of credit for, deservedly so, is the coaching staff that he's built. Now, look, some of the guys didn't work out, and he got rid of them. But he brought in other guys that were more aligned with his vision, and it's been, I think, a powerful part of what has happened with this football team. Now, all that being said, and all these bouquets being thrown their way, they haven't done anything. You got one winning season where you didn't make the playoffs. So you got 17 cracks at this thing coming up this year, and you better be ready to take advantage of it, because you found out last year, if you're not ready to start quickly, you're going to get behind the eight ball, and catching up can be, really difficult, if not impossible, like it was last year. And then your fate's in somebody else's hands. This team is good. This depth chart is good. Now you got to go out there and put it all together and prove it.
One last bouquet. Kudos to Lomas Brown. How great was that in the booth on Friday night, huh?
It was great.
Yeah.
It's go ahead.
I mean, just to be a part of that and just to see Lomas, we were talking earlier, just this organization feels like it's now starting to do everything right. And, to put Lomas Brown's name in that building as one of the great Lions of all time, he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, in my opinion. But the Lions don't need the Hall of Fame's permission to honor their own guy in their own building. So they are doing the right thing to put him in the pride of the Lions. And it's, long overdue, but we won't focus on that. But, just great for an all-time Lion.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit overdue, and I think probably people in the organization would tell you it is as well. But I think things kind of got bogged down with COVID, and they fell behind a little bit probably in what should have been a natural progression to get him in there. Look, just thrilled for him. They don't come any nicer than Lomas Brown. He's just a beautiful human being, and it was so cool to be there and to see the shock he had, and to see his family be there when he had no idea that they were all going to show up, and just the genuine surprise that he got when all that went down. He really had no idea. There weren't a lot of people that knew, but to be able to kind of be there and watch his face as that thing unfolded on the big board was really cool. I'm just so happy for him. You're right. He deserves consideration for the NFL Hall of Fame or Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's hard for those offensive linemen to kind of distinguish themselves. I mean, I think, as somebody who grew up in D.C., Joe Jacoby should be in there. That's another one who's kind of been overlooked. But Lomas, 7 Pro Bowls, all pro, and just somebody who throughout the 90s was one of, if not the best left tackles in the NFL. It's a hard position to distinguish yourself at. He did that. But we don't have touchdowns, and we don't have receptions, and we don't have interceptions, and we don't have tackles that we can apply to these left tackles to really, say, here's what he did. And I think that's where sometimes it becomes difficult to kind of judge these guys and get them the accolades or the enshrinements that they deserve. But this is awesome. His name deserves to hang in that building, and I'm so glad that it will. And I can't wait till, Monday night against the Raiders, when that place will be absolutely rocking with, a stadium packed with well-lubricated fans that will be there to just, make it a special night for him. And I get chills thinking about it because I just love the guy so much, and it's going to be awesome.
He did have Barry, though. He might not have had touchdowns, but he did have Barry to
And you know what? I think Barry would tell you that guys like Lomas and Kevin Glover were a big part of his success. And, it's Barry's Barry, but he'll point to Lomas and say, you know what? Having that guy at left tackle and Glover at center and the other guys that were part of those offensive lines throughout the years, Barry would be the first to tell you he didn't do it alone. He might have been able to, but he didn't. It's going to be really cool to see that.
Dude, I appreciate you spending this time with me, Dan. I could go on and talking about the fans. How about a silent count in a preseason game for the Giants? I mean, incredible.
It was a great crowd. Yeah, I mean, I guess people figured if they bought their season tickets, they might as well use them. So it was more than we're used to seeing for a preseason game, but it was really cool. And I anticipate we'll see a great crowd out there again on the Jacksonville game. And Ryan, I've told you before, there's nothing better about my job than seeing this team win and then seeing fans happy. So I'm excited. They're excited. I just want this thing to move in the right direction so everybody can finally get what everybody around here has waited so long for and deserves from this franchise. And I think, this is an exciting year where a lot of that could happen.
Amen to that. Hey, who's in the office with you now? Is Greg Canner in there or Matt Trump?
He just walked out. Here's Jeff Holloway. Here's Jennifer Hammond. She's
Hammers.
Here. Say hi to Ermanni.
Hi, Ermanni.
Hi, Hammer. How are you?
He says hi.
Oh, I don't see his face.
He's right. He's right there. You see his chin.
Miller has to be blocked because Miller likes to look at a big.
There's Holloway's.
Hey there,
There's Holloway's. He says, hey there, Hollowell.
Tell me when to go see his favorite college coach today.
Matt Trump is over there. Oh, she went to see your favorite college coach today.
Lloyd Carr or Jim Harbaugh?
He said Lloyd Carr, Jim Harbaugh.
All right, Dan. Thanks so much, bud. We'll be watching tonight. Fox 2 News at 5 and 6.
Appreciate you.
Great stuff. That's awesome. The great Dan Miller joining us here on Woodward Sports Network.